available to everyone. Some of the topics and contents are taken from that video and some are from different sources. So let us start. In the past, brain was thought to be, it is like a hardwire, and the moment you say something which is hardwired and fixed, we assume that there are limited capabilities, and through the course of evolution and heredity, the brain uh, thought to be that it is fixed and it cannot be changed for a specific function. And it was also thought that most of the brain changes occurs in the childhood, and as the age increases, these changes begin to decline. And earlier it was thought that each area of the brain was supposed to do function for a particular activity, like this is called as localization of the brain, and different part of the brain were localized for that particular function, and it was assumed that this localization is fixed and it cannot be changed. But further research told us that um, brain is not a hardwire, and brain is very much plastic. And when I say plastic is something which is moldable, changeable, and once you change, it remains into that change. So the plasticity refers to the brain's ability to reorganize the neural pathway throughout the lifespan as a result of experience. So always remember that how to give the experience is more important. To put simply, the brain's ability to change with learning. There is a change in internal structure of neuron, notably the synapses, and there is an increasing number of the synapses with the plasticity. So we are assuming that brain is plastic and it can be changed by the experience, and it starts in childhood, but it will continue throughout the life. As previously it was believed that it was only the majority of the plasticity occurs in childhood and eventually it will reduce, but plasticity is occurring throughout the lifespan, and it is worked upon, and this discovery that plasticity can be promoted or increased throughout the life has helped in planning and rediscovering the neurorehabilitation methods and approaches. One of the neuroplastic changes which occurs is called as neurogenesis, which is formation of new neuron. This neurogenesis starts at the beginning of week 3 of human development, and the rate is around 250,000 per minute until the birth. And previously it was thought that neurons cannot reproduce after the first few years of life. But new research says that neurogenesis may continue to occur throughout the lifespan. And it can be trained at the age of 70 plus or as well as 90 years. So based on this, the future is very bright. There is a growing scope that science will discover an effective way to guide the process of neural growth, to repair the areas of brain that are damaged due to injury or the diseases. So by rewiring the brain, we are actually trying to teach the old dog new tricks, and this is highly trainable. While we are talking about the plasticity, we need to remember the difference between plastic and elastic. When we say plasticity or plastic means something which can be moldable and changeable. But the second part is more important. Once you mold or change, it remains in the new form or shape. And this is called as plastic. And what is elastic? Basically anything which can change into form and shape, but it will revert back to its original shape and size. That is what is called as elastic. So whenever we give enough repetition, practice, and experience, and a long duration of training, the brain can go in a permanent plastic change, and it can remain there, provided you are giving enough opportunity to practice. So how does this occur? Basically, if you look at the topographical map, in the brain, each area is mapped out to perform some function. But this topographical mapping is also plastic. It is not fixed. Like an area of the brain is for upper limb or lower limb or face does not mean that it will be strictly for that. There can be overlap occurs and we can influence it. So brain is like the muscle that we can develop and work out, and we can increase the size and fibers of the muscles. Similarly, with the training, brain can also be changed. So the common quote can be go with this is that neuron that fire together, wire together, and use it or lose it. So if you use it, it will increase. If you don't use it, the number of neurons will go down. So neurons that fire together, wire together is a very simple but very effective concept. Whenever there are combination of activities or combination of neurons working together, this association phenomena of working together or activation of these neurons together in long run can cause newer synapses and newer connection, and it can retain for longer time based on the training. So you can see on the upper figure, the last part where you can see that there is a new synapse occurring, and in the lower figure on the right side, the dendrites are getting connected to new fibers, and then there is a new pathways are being formed. So how to apply this in routine practice? So whenever you are trying to do some two activities and you want them to wire together, like suppose if you are doing trunk extension along with low limb extension you want, so instead of training trunk extension separately in an activity and low limb extension in a different activity, if we combine, do a simple exercise such as sit to stand, which is a combination of lower limb extension activities and back extension and upward movement, which is basically all the extensors are fibers are acting together and the neurons associated will act together, and this all the neurons which are acting together and firing together will get wired together, and that will become a plastic permanent change. So next time when you use it, the efficiency of ability to do the sit to stand goes on improving. So rewire or reorganization of the brain so that new areas are developed to compensate for the failure or damaging neuron. Basically, whenever there is an injury happens, there are a lot of neurons are being damaged or non-functioning. So it does not mean that that function is lost from the brain. If you give good environment, experience, repetition, and practice, the associated neuron or close by neurons, which are although were previously not doing the same function what it was allocated to the another area of the brain, can be taken over by the associated neurons or close by neurons, and this process is called as reorganization of the neurons, and this can be improved by repetition, and once you go repeatedly doing some activities together, they form a recipe for the habits. So by these fundamentals, we can help children with disabilities or patients with our stroke to develop the brain areas through repetitive exercises designed to tackle the problem head on. So depend on which problem do you want to tackle, you design the exercise in such a way that it directly tackles the problem. Suppose somebody wants walking, or somebody wants turning, or somebody wants running. So you need to design activities, experiences, and set up in such a way that we are actually directly tackling the problem. And by the previous fundamentals where uh, the multiple neurons acting together, firing together will get wired together, and the new synapses form. And if we keep repeating this, the cortical reorganization or brain mapping also can happen. So understand how the brain will strengthen certain areas when exposed to a specific stimuli. So basically, we need to understand which areas we want to strengthen and which associated pathways we want to create. Based on that, you need to design exercise. When I'm saying that, does not mean only we have to look at the motor areas of the upper limb, lower limb, or trunk, because a task is a combination of multisensory stimuli as well as multiple joints and muscles together, as well as the environment. So the more you use specific stimuli like visual feedback or somatosensory system, this all system will fire together and then wire together, and the whole motor control of a particular task will be changed. But problem can occur if one area is strengthened as the another area may become weaker. Like this is what happens in blind people. In blind people, because the uh, visual area is not working there, the area of visual area will go down or goes in smaller size, and the area of the hand, which they use more frequently, can be taken over. So there can be overlapping of the weak fibers or weak neurons by the stronger neurons. This formation of new connections occurs through the synapses, and we need to understand the concept of the synaptic connections. At birth, approximately there were 2,500 synapses in the infancy. Um, at 3-year-old, we assume that most of the synapses occurred, and it was maximum or most of the development occurred in the first early years of life. But I'm not saying that it stopped there, but it occurs in the first few years of life. So at time there are around approximately 15,000 synapses. But in childhood we do a lot of multiple activities, and there are a lot of new connection, new learnings, new synapses occur. But in adolescence and in adulthood, we learn not to repeat some activities or some behavior, and then we lose 50% of these neurons and the synapses. So the rarely used synapses get eliminated. So by the previous principle or the concept, use or lose it, if you don't use it frequently, you lose it, and this previous connection which were theirs, they get lost. So it is your choice which synapses or which neurons you want to continue. Based on that, you need to practice that activities and maintain the synapse and make them synapses stronger. This is also good. Also, there are some behavior which are wrong behavior in the childhood which you learn, and if you don't keep repeating that behaviors and that activities and that movements, that will also get eliminated, and this can help you get rid of the abnormal behavioral activities. So how does this synaptic activation occur? So you can see that from the left side, if there is a synaptic activation, if there is a strong synaptic activation and it is more frequent, then it can cause changes in a synaptic structure, and then the connections get strengthened, and this can lead to implications or results. And but this connection also depends on how do you train. Like in children, if you do similar type of presentation and they are not getting involved actively, the training is not enough. So in that case, learning needs to be more reinforced based on their pattern of learning. And to enhance this learning, we can use technology to keep activating the synapses. So current example, like making the learning more easy, effective, and interesting and engaging. The Baiju app, which is a basically is an online app for learning primary and secondary children. It is very successful these days, and a lot of children are applying views for Baiju app because there they can ask questions, and they can see the repeated lectures. Also because the animation and the visual feedback, emotions, music also will help them to learn better than a typical didactic lecture which is given to a larger group, and there is no one-to-one contact. So probably that is how some children don't prepare the lectures in the class compared to the lectures which is given on the online platforms like Byju. But if the synaptic connections are weak, this connection doesn't happen, and then they get eliminated. So this neuroplastic changes or synaptic connection is basically the neural pathways connect relatively distance area of the brain uh, or nerve system. Each pathway is associated with particular action or a behavior. So the more you repeat, the pathway become more stronger. And every time we think, feel, or do something, we strengthen these pathways, and habits are well traveled pathways. So basically, like cycling is a habit. So whenever you start in this, start to know any new skill or any new complex activity, a new pathway starts getting generated. And the more you repeat and more you practice, this pathway becomes more stronger, and more they become stronger, they become habit. Like most of us had learned cycling or swimming in childhood, but since last 10-20 years we never cycled. But if I give you a cycle right now, uh, probably you'll be able to do the cycling very well without a lot of planning, because the cycling was repeated so frequently, and it became so strong pathways that is retained. But some of the activities, suppose somebody used to play some game in the childhood, but now because you at that time you were not interested so much and the practice was not given enough, that pathway was very weak, and again it was not repeated afterwards. You lose that pathway. Like we most of us forget the previous physics or chemistry experiments and maths experiment. Only we remember few experiences which were repeated more frequently, and that became stronger. So with this repeated and direct attention towards a desired change, we all have the ability to rewire our brain. So only just repetition, don't just focus on the repetition, also focus on the word called as direct attention. The more you are attentive in that activity, uh, it becomes more stronger. So this is a quote from the Norman Doyle's book, Brain That Changes Itself. We see with our brains, not our eyes. Eyes has a limited potential. It can only see in our in bright light, but if there is no light, probably our eyes is not able to see. But also, even in a good light, there are a lot of things our brain can see, understand, and interpret, which eyes don't see. So please look brain as a polysensory organ, and its sensory area are able to process signal from more than one senses. So at a time, brain is going to process a lot of signals from different areas of the brain. So these learnings or this repetition, whenever you repeat, these stages of learnings are followed by period of consolidation. So it get consolidated there. We have been given a brain that survives in the changing world by changing itself. As we know, the only thing which is constant is a change, and this is a continuously changing environment and the changing world. Fortunately, we have a brain which is able to change itself based on the demand and inputs and experiences. Simply, if you put tracking a complex line can improve children in all three areas, like speaking, writing, and reading. Uh, there are a lot of now new toys and equipment which helps them to track the alphabet and words, and which helps them not only in speaking, writing, and reading as well. Many children will benefit from brain area based assessment to identify their weakened function and a program to strengthen them, a far more productive approach than just tutoring that simply repeats a lesson and leads to endless frustration. Fortunately, the newer schools or so-called international schools, they are changing the way they are teaching. They are using different combination of methods as well as audio-visual feedbacks or experiences. Like instead of just teaching people what is a market, nowadays they are taking the children to the market and showing them what is the market, what are the different vegetables are there, how does it smell, how does it feels, which helps them, making them more learn than showing just a picture or PPT where they have to remember the image and then remember the name of the fruit. Acetylcholine, a brain chemical essential for learning, is higher in rats trained on difficult spatial problem than in rats trained on simpler exercises. When I say you need to design exercises simple, a simple does not mean easy. To give a simple example, suppose running is difficult than walking. So walking is a simple exercise, but walking 100 meter might be easy, but walking for long distance like 5 kilometer or 10 kilometer is not easy. So you can make any exercise simple, but still it does not mean that it has to be easy. The more you make difficult, more you add special problems, or like in children they do the game of maze walking where they can go on different platforms through tunnels or some barricadings. All these special problems helps them to learn, solve the problem. But nowadays in parenting, whenever a child tries to do any difficult or unorganized behavior, parents tend to stop them and trying to protect them. But by this thing, their acetylcholine will not get released, and they will not learn unless we teach them how to do the repetitive problem solving. Mental training or a life enriched environment increases brain weight by 5% in cerebral cortex of the animals. So this preclinical study shows that mental training in an enriched environment is very effective. So uh, taking the children's in a real life environment or creating enriched environment is very effective. Similarly, in adults, whenever we are teaching them any activity, instead of just mimicking the activity, if you create an enriched environment, it will help them to learn and practice more. That is how recently the virtual reality training um, is very effective, which actually creates a very enriched, engaging environment, and it is continuously changing and challenging. And this enrichment helps them to improve better than a routine, boring, repeated exercise program. Trained or stimulated neurons develop 25% more branches, increases synapses, increase their size and the number of connection per neuron and the blood supply than the neurons which is not trained. So with training, we can change all these parameters of neuroplasticity. Post-mortem examination has shown that education increased the number of branches among neuron, and increased number of branches drives the neuron further apart, leading to increase in the volume and thickness of the brain. The idea that the brain is like a muscle that grows with the exercise is not just a metaphor, but it is actually true that you can increase or grow the size of the neuroplasticity like a muscle. Brain is not an inanimate vessel that can feel. It is not like something which you feel and after that you no more can add anything. But it is like a creature with an appetite. One that can grow, this appetite which can grow and change with proper nourishment and exercise. So there is no limit how much you can train a brain, or there is no age limit that how much should be trained or not to be trained. Like I'm an academician, usually uh, whenever I used to teach a topic, I used to teach some of the like motor control I'm teaching in second year. I used to teach the same way the second year BPT, uh, the same way I used to teach in MPTs. So my colleague used to say that, why are you teaching this complex problem to the small children or a BPT student? But the logic is like, then it is not the age which limits learning. Whatever you teach at any age, anybody, if your training explanation is good enough, it is easy for anybody to learn, and any small brain or not small brain, small age people also can learn these uh, new concepts. This is now, up till now we have learned that the neuroplasticity can change and can do the overlapping, but this competitive nature of the plasticity affects us, all of us. Always remember, basically neuroplasticity is not only happening when we as a therapist training somebody. Neuroplasticity is happening throughout the day and all the time. Simply put, our patients with stroke, we give a small session of 1 hour, 2 or 3 hours. So we teach some new skills, but next 20 hours they are learning different motor skills. So if they keep repeating some abnormal activity, that will have a more competitive advantage over what we taught. Like, we must have observed that a lot of people, when we teach in the clinic how to do the supine to sit with the turning on sideline and then come to sit, or do sit to stand a typical manner, or walking in a typical manner which is supposed to be so called normal, but the moment they come next time or when they are doing out of clinic, they go back to the previous habit and our training does not work. That's because of the competitive nature of brain, because most of the time of the day they are which is very, which is more convenient to them, and that uh, skills or that practice or that abnormal practice uh, getting a competitive advantage over the therapist training. So what is the point I'm trying to make is that you just not to focus, suppose you are not supposed to focus on the training duration in your therapy, but it is also important that you emphasize them to practice the similar activity at home. To do that, it should or inability of the patient to practice similar exercise at home is can be blamed to the therapist, because if a therapist designs exercises which are very complex and requires lot of equipment, and similar setup or similar equipment are not available at the home, the patient will not able to repeat the same way what we are doing in the clinic. So my point is here that whenever you are designing any exercise, please make sure that or think about how he will do the same type of activity at home without lot of help or lot of resources. If it is similar and to the exercise program which is given to the home, given at home, there is a high chances that it will give more opportunity for them to practice at home the same skill. This is very strongly observed when I went to learn motor learning program from Australia. There the coordinator used to give a very simple exercise, although they have very advanced equipment, like simply whenever a hemiplegic do any activity, the upper limb goes into flexion, and to avoid flexion, like they used a cardboard, a regular cardboard, and they used to wrap around the elbow to make it as a pedi wrap, and practice all the exercise there in the OPD with the same thing. And when the patient goes home, they used to give that all equipment which they manufactured with the raw materials, and the patient could practice the same thing at home. So you can pick up very small materials, non-expensive material, or which is easily available in your OPD or at home, and similar exercise should be designed so that they can do the same activity at home. Because of this, whenever this thing was done with them, uh, usually there the patients comes only once or twice a week to the OPD, and most of the time they practice at home. So they were given homework like every day you have to practice around 2000 repetition of the particular exercise. And because it was more easy, more organized, and it gave more opportunity to practice at home, the people there used to do a lot of homeworks. If you give a homework of 2000 repetition, they used to do 3000 repetition per day. So it was not the patient who was wrong. It was actually the way it was, the exercise was designed was wrong. And it did not give more opportunity for them to practice at home. So please remember this competitive nature of the brain. If we stop exercising our mental skill, we do not just forget them, but the brain maps space for those skill, and is turned over to the skill which is more practiced. So like this, in the patients of phantom limb, like here you can see that the area of upper limb and face is very close by. So if you don't do lot of hand activities, and example of an actor or somebody who uses lot of facial expression compared to the hand, the area of face will be taken over, the area of the hand will be taken over of the facial areas, or other way around, a surgeon who is doing a lot of minute hand activity, the area of face can be taken over by the hand area partly. So like this overlapping can be happen. And in phantom limb basically, the arm is cut down, so there is no arm and there are no sensation from that arm. So there is no repetitive stimuli from the arm. So the area of face which is close to the arm area is taken over by the face. So the arm is over, area is taken over by the face. So whenever this patient with phantom limb, we touch them on their face, they used to feel the sensation of pain or touch on the hand due to this overlapping mechanism. Uh, and this phenomena of overlapping was very effective in treatment of the phantom limb pain. When this patient used to have pain in the hand, any sensory stimuli, which is pain reducing stimuli given on the face, was effective in reducing the pain in the upper limb. So this is the nature of the overlapping or particle reorganization phenomenon of neuroplasticity. As the brain map gets bigger, the individual neuron gets more efficient in two stages. At first, the map takes up more space, but after a while, individual neuron within the map become more efficient, and effectively and eventually, fewer neurons are required to perform the same task. So first it will do the overlapping, but does not mean that every time you'll require so many neurons. So the same task can be performed with less neuron and leading to less fatigue. A powerful signal has a greater impact on the brain. When we want to remember things we have heard, we must hear it clearly, because a memory can be only as clear as its original signal. This is a very classical example in our didactic teaching. The backbencher who are sitting in the back, they cannot clearly hear the speaker or the teacher, because they can't hear clearly. The memory which is created in their brain is also faded, and that is what happens when in the exam the examiner asks them explain about the topic. The backbencher always struggle to explain, and then they add their own words and the concept, and then everybody laughs on them. But actually it was not the backbencher which were more bad or poor, but because the information transferred or the hearing they got, that was not clear, and that is how the learning was not good. This concept is very important. One of the neurologists from Pune, Dr. Ichhapuria, we were discussing one day. So I just asked him, why do you think that everybody thinks neuro is so difficult? So he very well explained me. He said, it is neuro is not difficult, but the way it is taught makes it more difficult. Because most of the teachers, sometimes when they teach, instead of making it more simple, they try to make it more complex and more complicated, and the understanding becomes poor, and then everybody thinks it is difficult. This statement of Dr. Ichhapuria changed my concept, and from that day my aim of life was to make neuro rehab simple, so that people can understand the concept of neuroplasticity, neurorehabilitation in a very simple manner. And if they understand it very simply, probably they will apply more frequently. And in long run, people will no longer find neuro more difficult than musculoskeletal rehabilitation. So with this practice, whenever you there are some brain circuit are there, and whenever you do learn new technique, new method or new activity, a new synapse which is shown in a green arrow is formed. But it does not mean that there are only good synaptic changes or new good plasticity happen, but there can be associated or another bad synapses can happen, which is not wanted. So we need to remember neuroplasticity can be a two-edged sword, which can help you or it can cause more problem also. Recently, researchers think that obsessive compulsive disorder or autism are basically are the example of high neuroplasticity which is occurring in their brain and which is causing this symptom. This understanding of higher neuroplasticity now helping us to remodel the neuroplastic changes and reduce the effect or abnormal problems which are occurring in OCDs and autism. Learning. To keep the mind alive requires learning something new, truly new, with intense focus. Most of the synaptic changes or neuroplasticity occurs more frequently when you learn something new or something which is complex. If you do same repetitive thing, there is a less chance of neuroplasticity, but if you learn something new, the neuroplastic changes occurs more. And because it is something new and more complex, we attend it more and we give a lot of close attention. So this intense focus helps in generating more neuroplasticity. There are different chemistries are involved for learning than in unlearning. Most of us always focus on learning, but there is also a need to give a focus on unlearning. Simply to explain learning and unlearning, it is easy to write anything on a white slate or white background which is empty. But it is very difficult to write on the background whiteboard which is written with a lot of information. So anything which you add new may not able to understand very easily. So the way we focus on learning, we also need to focus on unlearning. As I said earlier, neuroplasticity can help you to change also, but unlearning, to teach unlearning, we can use the phenomena, use it or lose it. And if you don't use, we lose. So any behavior which is not promoted or not repeated more frequently helps in unlearning. Unlearning and weakening connection between neuron is just as plastic process, as just as important as learning and strengthening them. So in our perspective, most of the chronic hemiplegic, when they come to us, probably they have already learned. I don't say all the patterns are abnormal, but because these are the compensatory patterns, they learn to solve the problem. Like in a village, they started walking, what are the fashion they want to walk. So they learn an abnormal pattern of gait or circumduction. Instead of just focusing on teaching what is normal, we also need to focus on teaching them or unlearning the abnormal pattern of movement. And how this can be done? It can be done by a concept called as constraining. By simply constraining, you can stop the occurrence of that behavior. To explain it, suppose somebody is walking with the circumduction where there is a lot of movement which is going outward during walking. So to constrain this, what I do, I make the person walk close to the wall on the affected side. Now, because the wall is very close to the person, whenever he tries to do more circumduction, the wall going to constrain the outer movement of the circumduction, and there is a probability that instead of going outward, the circumduction is reduced. This is a very simple example of how we can stop the occurrence of abnormal behavior. And because we are not allowing them to do more frequently the outward circumduction movement, this is going to help them in learning because it is not frequently repeated. And instead of that, he's using a new pattern to compensate for the foot clearance, which will get more repeated, and then it causes neuroplasticity with the learning concept. If you only strengthen connections and our neural networks, we will get saturated. So you can't just add. That is why you need to delete something from the learning brain. That is why unlearning is very important. Evidence suggests that unlearning existing memory is necessary to make room for new memories in our networks. So along with learning, also focus on unlearning of abnormal motor behaviors. Massive neural organization occurs in two stages of life: when you fall in love or when you begin parenting. Because in our day-to-day life, you must have noticed that whenever somebody falls in love, a male or female, you are ready to do a lot of new experiments. You try to change your behavior, action, dressing, talking to impress your partner. But basically, this is a very good example of cortical new organization of new behavior. And we learn a lot of new activities in that period. So that is how I use this concept very frequently whenever I'm teaching any patient to do something or not do something. In regular talks, I come up with the topic of love or boyfriend, girlfriend, and I make it emotional. And then I give an example that you are supposed to do that for someone, or for to be with someone or to get married. And this concept helps them to practice more, get actively involved in the exercise program, and it gives them more purpose, or simply it helps in redefining their why they need to improve. Similarly, in parenting, whenever a baby is born, the mother and father has to make a lot of changes, and that is where there is a lot of cortical reorganization occurs. I observed that usually a normal human being requires 6 to 8 hours of sleep, but a mother has to feed the baby every 2 hours. But due to this, she can't get enough sleep, but still she can manage. So because the parenting was so much, the body get used to this new pattern of sleep cycles, small sleep, and she also learns lot of new activities or behaviors to cope with the child's need. So this parenting concept is very important in improving newer newer organization of the brain maps and promoting neuroplasticity. So like this, you can find different events or activities or emotions which forces a lot of neuroplastic changes, and then you can use that in your treatment while you are doing uh, any goal setting or doing the therapy. So normally when we make mistakes, three things happen. The first thing, whenever we do the mistake, we get a mistake feeling. That is the feeling that something has gone wrong. Second, because we get a feeling of wrong, we get anxious, and the anxiety drives us to correct the mistake. And third, once you correct the mistake, an automatic gear shift occurs in the brain that moves us to the next thought or action. But in patient with OCD, this automatic gear shift does not occur, and the same feeling of mistakes keeps continuing, and they keep correcting the mistake. So in the case of OCD, they feel like their hands are not clean or there are germs. So they get a feeling of wrong thing. So they try to wash the hand, which is a correction. But after washing the hand, the automatic reset doesn't occur, and they don't get the feeling that the mistake is being corrected. So they keep washing the hand again and again. So how to break this? The breaking is very effective and very simple. First of all, you have to re-label what is happening. You cannot change the trigger, neither can you change the response, but you can change the interpretation of what is happening. The feeling, which was like a feeling of wrong, was due to the concept that the hands are not clean or there are germs on the hand. So instead of saying that there are no germs on the hand and don't clean, you need to change this by re-labeling. Whenever the patients get the feeling of or anxiety to wash the hand, they need to say that it is not the attack of the germs, but it is the OCD attack. I am feeling OCD attack. Once you say that it is a feeling of the hands are not clean, the solution is clean the hand. But once you re-label that it is a OCD attack, you understand this is something which is not accepted and it is happening as a pathological level. So I don't need to worry about it. It's okay. Even if I don't wash my hands will be still clean, and it is just an OCD attack. By this, the patients learn how not to keep cleaning the attack. So basically in this, again, we are using the concept of use or lose it. Because they more frequently wash the hand, they get more feeling. Because they are now not washing the hand, the less they do it, the less they feel the urge to do it. So it is not what you feel while applying the technique that counts, but it is what you do is that counts. So the struggle is not to make the feeling go away, but the struggle is not to give the feeling only. If you don't give the feeling that there is a need to wash, there is no need or there is no anxiety of correcting it. So now we are going to the different point here. This is experiment done in two groups, where one group was allowed to do actual piano practice of 2 hours for 5 days, and the other group was supposed to just imagine as if they are playing the piano, and then they were recorded about for their brain activity. And it was found that the area which was there for the hand control, in both the group there is increase in the size of the hand area. There was one group who actually did the practice, and the other group only imagined of doing the practice. This concept helped in the concept of mental imagery training. Basically, you don't need to actually do the action, but imagination also can help you in changing the reorganization. Like most of our patients with upper limb dysfunction, they do not have so much of motor control in their upper limb. But if you give a good enriched environment where they are getting imagination of ability to move the affected arm, this will cause a lot of cortical reorganization, and then this cortical reorganization which is happening in the secondary motor area will help the primary area to stimulate motor actions, and then we can slowly get the control in the upper limb. So this is the basic foundation of mental imagery training. Next concept, sleep. We always don't focus so much on the sleep, but when we learn a skill in during the day, we'll be better at it next day if we get a good night's sleep. So it is very essential for all our neurological patients to have a good night's sleep of around 6 to 8 hours minimum. But because most of our patients has multiple pain related problem or spasmodic problem, they don't get enough sleep, which again can affect their ability to learn new patterns and movement. Early childhood trauma causes massive plastic change in the hippocampus. Let us give an example of early childhood trauma with aquatic therapy. Like traditionally, children, whenever we take them to training of swimming, children are being forced or they are pulled and thrown into the water against their wish. This creates a fear or anxiety in them, and this childhood trauma will cause permanent change in their brain. So throughout the life, people are always scared of water. Instead, if you gradually take them to the water and slowly explore, let them explore at their own pace, they will not get scared of that water, and they will be able to learn swimming better than a forced action. So we need to be cautious. How are we creating these childhood traumas? The longer people are depressed, the smaller their hippocampus gets. So depression also causes hippocampal changes, and it causes learning. Like you must have seen that nowadays these teenagers, they get depressed by a very small thing, and this depression is causing or affecting their learning. So we need to promote students or teenagers to not to get depressed, and even if they get depressed, we need to help them faster and diagnose them and take them out of the depression faster, because it will affect their learning year of childhood. So don't get worked up about the little thing. Stress releases glucocorticoids, which may kill cells in the hippocampus. The teenager or millennials, usually they get stressed or depressed by a very small thing, like simply somebody puts a wrong comment on Facebook, or if they put hi to somebody and they don't reply for a long time, they get stressed up and they get irritated. So these small experiences are also affecting their hippocampus, and it is also affecting their learning. Neurogenesis, stem cells that continuously regenerate all throughout our life. Mentally enriched mice has 50% increase in volume of their hippocampus, and there is 50% increase in number of neurons. Massive pruning back in adolescence has its merits. In adolescence, there are a lot of things we learn not to continue, and we put to end to that activity. This is very important in their normal childhood development, to stop some behavior or some activities. So getting rid of these extras keep the brain more focused and efficient. Many studies suggest that people with more education seems better protected from mental decline. So mental decline or aging is not a natural phenomena. It can be slowed or reduced with good education and training. Activities that involve genuine concentration are associated with lower risk of dementia. So genuine concentration with aging, basically people don't give a lot of concentration in day-to-day activities. That is why these newer virtual reality games or different activities, they make them more concentrated on that task, and that will help them to reduce the dementia. Age-related memory loss seems almost certainly reversible with right mental exercises. Physical exercise is important because the brain needs oxygen. So simply walking at a good pace stimulates the growth of new neurons. Age of 35 to 55 are the peak of creativity in most of the fields. People in their 60s and 70s, although they work at a slow speed, are as productive as they were in their 20s. So Pablo Casal, he's a celicist. At the age of 91, he was asked, "Master, why do you continue to practice? You are already too good in this." He was one of the best celicists in 90s. Then he said, "I practice because I make progress." So the more you make progress, like with practice, you can make progress at any age. Paying close attention is essential to long-term plastic changes. In numerous experiments, it has been found that lasting changes only occurs when monkeys paid close attention. When the animals perform tasks automatically without paying attention, they changed their maps, but the change did not last. We often praise the ability to do the multitasking, but while multitasking, your attention is divided, and this divided attention does not create long-lasting changes in the brain maps. So multitasking is not always better to improve brain mapping. Rewards are very crucial feature of learning. Whenever you give rewards of achievement, people tend to repeat that activity, and that activity becomes more learned behavior. If you keep doing activities and you don't get rewards, the learning does not get facilitated. Each time the child is rewarded, his or her brain secretes neurotransmitters such as dopamine and acetylcholine, which helps to consolidate the map changes just made. Dopamine reinforces rewards, and acetylcholine helps the brain to tune in and sharpen the memories. The release of dopamine can be very easily stimulated. Whenever you get a success, you see a surge of dopamine. So larger the success, larger is the release of dopamine. So how can we apply this in day-to-day practice? Always give a patient a target. Suppose say 200 repetition of a particular exercise with whatever the breaks he needs. The moment he achieves that target, he feels the feeling of achievement. And when you say that, "Good job, you achieved your target," this reward helps them in learning better, and it will create permanent changes. The neurons can only be activated when something is important, surprising, or novel things occur, if we make the effort to pay close attention. So whenever you are doing activities, you need to make them or make them understand the importance of the task. If they do not understand the importance of the task, they will not pay close attention. There should be surprising elements, or there should be variations in the exercise, or there should be variation in the challenge. The more it is surprising and challenging, again, as a normal behavior, we pay more close attention. Or anything which is novel or new, creative, people pay attention. That is why you might have seen that a lot of patients want to take or are ready to take new treatment or new equipment or new therapy because it is something new or novel or more creative. So in our day-to-day sessions also, we need to keep designing some novelties in their actions. Either you change novelty in the exercise program, or novelty in the environment, or novelty in the repetition, or novelty in the exposure, or novelty in the rewards. You need to be more creative in generating these more novelties, surprising elements, or importance. And all this will help you and the patient to pay more close attention, and which will create long-lasting neuroplasticity. So based on the work with plasticity, here are the number of training principles we can learn. Training is more effective if the skills are closely related to everyday life. This is I emphasize very frequently in my sessions. While you are designing novelty, you move too much away from everyday life skills. Although novelty helps in paying attention, but because it is too much away from their everyday life, the learning does not occur. Like we give peg exercise to adult, lifting pegs is not a, or playing with the toys, it is not a action of adults, and it is not related to his everyday life. So he's not going to pay close attention. Instead of that, if you take an adult, usually boys like cars or some technical equipment, you make them do exercise with that activity. Like I take patient to teach them hand activities, or cleaning teaching a man to instead of teaching a man to clean the table, tell him to clean the car. He'll be happily do it, and because it is his everyday life, this will help in causing more neuroplastic changes. Again, the training should be done in incremental process. There has to be stages of increment. If there is no different levels of challenge or difficulty or load or intensity or repetition, if you keep repeating same repetition, same activity every day, after a few days the learning gets slowed down, and maybe the learning does not occur after some time. Work should be concentrated into short time instead of going for a continuous long hours of work. Edward Tobbs explains this as a mass practice. So you can select one particular task and do a mass practice around that in a short period of time. So suppose I give you example, you wanted to train somebody stair climbing. So you do exercises which are related to the stair climbing, small stepping exercise, up, down, side shifting, and whole practice is around that. This mass practice for around 1 hour, half an hour is more effective than doing supine exercises, then sitting exercise, then standing exercise, and then walking exercise, and then taking them on the stairs for a period of 2-3 hours in one day, and then this is repeated less frequently, say after 2 days or after 2 weeks. Instead of that, a small mass practice at more frequent intervals is going to help to produce more plastic changes than a long-term practice with less frequency. So in the last part, I wanted to mention that you need to focus on repetition, frequency, and intensity. And the last point is opportunity to practice. The more you give exercises which helps them to practice at home, which will give them more opportunity to practice. So not only work on just repetition, also work on the frequency, also work on the intensity, and then lastly, opportunity to practice at home. Plasticity is basically two-edged sword. So there is a plastic paradox. Same plasticity that allows us to change our brain and produce more flexible behaviors is also the source of the rigid behaviors. All the people start out with plastic potential. Some of us, as we grow and develop, we enhance that flexibility. But for others, there is less flexibility. For others, the spontaneity, creativity, and unpredictability of the childhood gives way to a routinized existence that repeats some behaviors and turns into rigid caricature of ourselves. So that is how you can see that some of the children who got a wrong exposure in childhood, that behavior get repeated, and in long run these people are responsible for the bad activities or the criminal activities in our society. So like in our Bollywood, you must have seen movies where one guy was exposed to a good education, good lifestyle, and he's been trained under a father who is a policeman, so he becomes a police inspector. Whereas a twin who was separated from the brother in childhood and was been raised by a criminal, he's been exposed with a different exposure and he becomes a criminal. So although both had a similar brain structure, similar capabilities, but the exposure created a different behavior and different characters of people just because of abnormal training or different exposure. So plasticity can be helped to create flexible behavior as well as more rigid behavior. So you need to understand plasticity itself is not good or bad. It is just the way it is. It is we who need to be more careful what we do, what we think, what we learn, and what we act. Brain is learning everything. If you repeat same behavior, it will become more plastic change and it will become habit and it will become your personality and character. So we need to be very careful what we are exposing to our brain. Thank you. So in today's lecture, our aim was to just to stimulate your brain to think neuroplasticity differently. In next session, we'll be discussing what are the different types of neuroplasticity and neuroplastic processes, how to increase or decrease neuroplasticity, factors affecting neuroplasticity and learning and recovery, and the most important, everybody teaches us what is neuroplasticity, but it is very difficult to apply in clinical practice. So we are also going to learn how to apply this neuroplasticity in clinical practice. Thank you. So any questions? Surabhi?
Please unmute yourself if you have any questions and start the video before asking the question so that we can identify who's asking the question. And please report in short from where you are and what you practice so that it is easy for us to answer your question.
Yes, Nidhi. No questions? Okay. So if there are no questions, we can start with the feedback. What did you learn today? What are the new additional point you thought was more important for today's lesson, and how will you apply in your day-to-day practice? Nidhi, you can start.
Basically, I like the point. I like neuroplasticity a lot. So, in neurological patients, like pain should not be the feedback given always. So, if they say that they get a lot of pain in their leg or a lot of pain in the part where they don't have sensation, so giving the feedback that the pain is not a unpleasant sensation, but the pain is a good sensation for them because they are getting that sensation in the part where they have no sense. So this feedback will help them in creating the wires that it is a positive feedback and that won't be an unpleasure sensation for them later.
Okay. Like as you said, pain. Traditionally, no pain, no gain concept was there. We can use similar like in most of our neurological patients, there is always tingling numbness which is there. In recovery, we don't get normal sensation when we get the recovery. The first sensation in the sensory recovery is always unpleasant and it is weird. And different patients experience different sensation. And most commonly, they explain is as a tingling, numbness, or burning sensation. Instead of labeling it that it is a pathological pain, if we tell them, and basically if you say it is a pathological pain, pain causes anxiety, anxiety causes spasm, spasm causes pain, so this cycle gets repeated and increases their pain. But if I relabel that this pain is actually not pathological, uh, pain is always good because it warns us something is happening in the body, and this tingling numbness is also a sign of sensory recovery, or the tingling numbness is also sign of sensory recovery. Then instead of considering the tingling as a abnormal sensation, they will start accepting as it is a part of the recovery, and the cycle of anxiety and spasticity and pain will reduce. Always remember, this will not reduce their pain, but it will reduce their interpretation and experience about the pain, and long run the pain will become more habitual and it will no longer the troublesome phenomena. Nikhil, Nikhil Dhut,
Hello. Yes, sir.
any question? Tell me your feedback. What you learned today?
The thing is neuroplasticity. What we've been just saying it is. Hello.
Start your
Am I
video.
audible, sir?
You're audible. Start your video.
Might be dark, sir.
Okay, no problem. Okay, continue. Start.
Yes, we've been just saying neuroplasticity has been the age-old thing, saying that the reorganization occurs, the brain develops on its own. It's not to practice the thing repeated. And there are lots
Keep
of
the
things
phone
that are to
closer.
be
We can't
added.
hear you. Keep little phone closer on the.
Okay. Is this okay now, sir?
Better.
Hello.
Better.
So the age-old, it's been just thought that neuroplasticity is that we're just supposed to repeat the same movement again and again and keep practicing it the same thing. But then many things have to be added. As you said, we're supposed to keep on trying something novel, something new, keep on adding a bit of difficulties, and supposed to be concentrating on the frequency and how to getting it into day-to-day life. That are the things what I feel like it should be added from now on. And a lot many different concepts that just keep on what I feel like is changing with the thoughts what you've been just saying and listening to the things, sir.
Okay, that's very good, very good. Thank you, for that feedback, sir. Any question?
No, no, so that's fine.
No, thank you. Yes, Natasha.
Hello, sir. Good evening. So in today's lecture, I would like to give the feedback because yesterday I had attended the doubt difficulty session, and two of my doubts were cleared there in the session itself. So my feedback for today's lecture is that I really like the unlearning concept which you told, that it is important to unlearn something, because that's how we can create. Means the brain needs space to learn new things. So that was one of the new concept I like. And another new concept, that we cannot force neuroplasticity only by repetitions. We need emotional touch. That a really good example you told, ki, it is really important to what do you call, to give an emotional touch, and that's how it is one of the way to create neuroplasticity. And the third most important unique concept I learned today was about phantom limb pain. I never knew that the upper limb sensation of the phantom limb pain can be of the phantom limb can be covered by recovering sensation of the face. So I mean sensitizing the face. So maybe if we can search more on that, then more of neuroplasticity concepts will be clear if more deeper insight can be achieved about that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Priyanka.
Yes, sir. From today's lecture, I learned. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. If you
So,
start your video.
no, sir. I am comfortable by audio only.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. So, as everyone is at home, so what we can do to improve our neuroplasticity, that is, we can learn something new. So, as the brain benefits from learning, the way our body benefits from exercises. Secondly, we can reduce stress by watching podcasts and doing medication. Thirdly, we can know ourselves what we can do. Find a good reason for learning, then you will try harder and focus more on the task. And we can get quality of sleep, as a brain needs sleep to set connections that are important for memory and learning. And lastly, we can do exercise at home now, as exercise improve oxygen supply to the brain, and the brain increases the brain volume. So we nowadays, as we are at home, we can improve our neuroplasticity by doing such things.
Thank you. Radhika Pandey.
Hello, Gajanan.
Hi. If possible, start your video, please.
Yeah, just 1 second. I'll just
Audio is not clear. Audio is not clear. Don't move.
Right now, can you listen to?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I can hear you.
totally
You are not audible. You are not audible. There is a lot of resonance.
Oh. Am I now?
Better now. Go ahead.
So,
We'll come back to you. I think there is some problem with your audio. I'll come back to you again. Archana Kejriwal. Archana Kejriwal.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm starting the video, but it's not allowing me. Sir, I'm Archana Nangalia. Remember me?
Yeah, I remember you.
Sir, I'm starting the video.
Archana,
Sir,
can
but
you?
it's not
Surabhi, can you?
starting.
Surabhi,
Yeah,
can you?
I-
Sir, I'm trying to from my end, but I'm not able to. Archana, you must have got a request for start the video. Can you please click on that?
yeah, I'm starting my video. Just a second.
Okay, done. Radhika, you can be seen.
Hello.
Archana, go ahead.
So I'm not able to start my video.
Okay.
Actually, I've attended the lecture from half only.
Mhm.
Yeah. What I learned is like I practice in Amravati now, and we have less resources over here. So the idea actually I am using it since 4 years. Ki with less resources, what I available at home, the patient get good results and they get motivated and they do the home exercises very properly, and they never forget to do their homework, and I am getting good results out of that actually by
Wow,
using
that's
the home resources.
very good. Just wanted to mention
And
that
this
uh,
I'm practicing since.
basically just wanted to mention that
Yes, sir.
to be novel or more creative, you don't need to always have a high fancy equipment or expensive equipment. Novelty is very simple. Anything which is different than routine is novelty or more creative. So you can use very simple technology to create these things and then give the message.
And
Uh,
yes, sir. And one more thing, the mental imaginary, what I have read before also, and now also you explained in this lecture, that also I'm experimenting with my patients. It is giving good results actually. The
Great.
mental imaginary thing what I take in my sessions also, and I tell patients to practice at home also. So the next day or even in a week I am getting good results of mental imaginary also actually.
Oh, great. Congrats. You want to start again?
So thank you, sir. And it was, yes, sir.
You continue, Archana.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Radhika?
I think so. I'll just unmute myself right now rather than giving God, because
I suggest you take your headphone out. Just talk with the phone because of the headphone. I think there is a resonance there.
no, I'm not using my headphones right now. So it was really wonderful after so many years. So wonderful. Now we already knew all those things, but actually everyone is channelist. So everything, the blocks are coming in their one place. It's like solving a puzzle very easily and with the right processing. So the journey of learning with you, Neero, it started with you only, and it still continues with me. So again regarding the neuroplasticity, the learning, part. And again, I need to be
I think there is still problem with your audio. We can't clearly hear you.
maybe there will be some issues, but it
Ma'am,
was really wonderful.
Ma'am, can you type in the chat if possible, please? It will be easier for us to understand what you are saying and we can address.
Surbhi, do you know anybody there in the meeting who is not spoke right now?
I think we have covered everyone, sir.
We have covered everyone. Okay. So you want to say something, Surbhi?
Okay. I see that Radhika ma'am is giving a feedback from the chat in the chat. We should give her some time for typing out.
She will type in that and you can continue.
Yes, sir. I like the idea of using neuroplasticity for in patients with OCD, and the concept of how we can change the stimulus which they have for doing some action and replacing it with by saying them that it's not the attack by germs, but it is the attack of OCD, and the way in which they can control their behavior in such manner. And I think it will be very useful from the neuropsychology point of view as well when we see the patients with OCD. So that was a great take home for me, and it was wonderful hosting the session for today. And I think it will be great to see our next sessions and how they go along. And I think that's it.
Okay. Anybody has any question about the next series of lectures? If there are no questions, we'll end the session.
Sir, we have got a response from Radhika ma'am. She
You can
says it
read.
was wonderful attending the session. Unlearning concept is totally mind changing, and thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you, Radhika ma'am, for your feedback.
Thank you everybody for joining the session. We look forward to see you next session. Next sessions will be always on Tuesdays and Thursdays around 7:30. We'll put the notification